And to be this, she's
Yeah.
something.
Okay, let's get going. Last one of the day, guys. And they gave us the best room and it's the closest to the snacks. So for the 5 of you here, yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Kelly Haynes. I'm a researcher and evaluator at the Institute for Community Inclusion. That's at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. I'm here with my colleague, Amy Steuben-Gage. She's the project director for the Career Pathways Advancement Project that we'll be talking about today. Obligatory grant information. So this project is funded by the Rehabilitation Services Administration. It's one of the DIF grants. We heard a lot about DIF grants today. One of my favorite kind of grants. It's the career advancement, the Cs, the 421 Cs. Nebraska VR is the primary grantee, and my team at the ICI, we're one of the project partners. So we're doing the evaluation and the technical assistance. And we're sure to include the RSA disclaimer here that you should not assume any endorsement by the federal government. I just want to take a minute here and go slow. I just want to acknowledge the legacy of our colleague, Mary Kunas-Neary. She attended this conference last year, and I remember when she got home, she called me and she said, Kelly, we have to go next year and we have to present on this project. And I was like, okay, sounds great, Mary, I'll apply. And Mary sadly passed away earlier this year. So Amy and I are here. We're going to do our best. We're going to try to continue to kind of carry Mary's values through. She led this project from the beginning. And under her leadership, they really made significant progress towards the project's goals. So thank you. Our plan for today. So we're going to describe the core components of the Career Pathways Advancement Project. We're going to share some of the interim evaluation findings. So the project's more than halfway through, but there's still another about 2 years to observe outcomes. So these are really early findings. And Amy's going to help us kind of think through some of those factors that are impacting the sustainability, really thinking about how to embed career advancement in a VR program. So Nebraska VR has been laying the foundation for career pathways and advancement services since 2015. So they're about a decade in. I think personally they're way ahead out in the VR space thinking about advancement. They were one of the recipients of the Career Pathways for Individuals with Disabilities, the CPID model demonstration grants, where they piloted this Career Pathways advancement model. Now we call it the 1.0 because now we're in the 2.0 stage. We'll talk a little bit about what that 1.0 looked like. So the idea there was to pilot this upskill backfill approach. So the plan was to call past VR clients, those who were served by Nebraska VR, who had closed into competitive integrated employment, and invite them to come back to VR to advance in their career. They did this by providing individuals with access to training and education opportunities. And through that work, they helped over 200 people to obtain higher wages, more employer-provided benefits, so things like vacation time and sick leave, retirement benefits. And at the same time, as these people are kind of moving up or upskilling, they're creating these entry-level opportunities for other VR participants to backfill into those roles. It was super innovative at the time. I think the original upskill backfill came out of the state of Washington workforce, and Nebraska VR picked it up and said, we think this would work with our population. Businesses also benefited because their employees were receiving, free support essentially to upskill and gain some credentials. Where we are now, building on that success of CPAP 1.0, that pilot program, Nebraska VR was awarded an additional 5-year, another DIF grant, like I said. So now we affectionately call it CPAP 2.0. And I don't know, I didn't say this in the beginning, but if you haven't realized, the CPAP thing has nothing to do with the sleep apnea. So we hear that sometimes. So building on that foundation of CPAP 1.0, the 2.0 has allowed the Nebraska VR team to continue to refine this model. I think, at this point, this many years in, I will say that there's an emerging evidence base. It's certainly not at the level of evidence-based practice, but thinking about the theme of the conference here, I think we're moving in that direction. So some of the refinements that we're looking at with CPAP 2.0 are broadening the target population. So the CPAP 1.0 target population were past VR clients who had closed into high demand, high growth occupations. And those people were in pretty good jobs and they moved up. So with CPAP 2.0, wanted to broaden the experience to include individuals with more significant disabilities and additional barriers to employment. So this is things like individuals who closed into competitive integrated employment while still receiving Social Security benefits or other public benefits. And they're also targeting individuals who closed into those low wage occupations. So they looked at their past closures and grabbed a list, literally a list of about 2,000 people who had the lowest wage, lowest earnings when they closed out of VR. There's also an increased emphasis on business engagement and employer support. So they've got dedicated business-facing staff who are providing those supports to businesses. This also opens up an opportunity for kind of a third target population where through the business partnerships, they're getting referrals of incumbent workers from those businesses. And in many cases, these are people who have never heard of VR, never identified as having a disability, but they're learning about Nebraska VR through the business partnerships and the engagement that the business pathway specialists are, they're out there in the community. So that's been a really interesting innovation. There's also an emphasis, similar but different, an emphasis on really connecting in with the training providers in the state, thinking about what credentials are out there and how we can sort of build a database around that and connect the VR customers with those opportunities. The other piece we looked at with CPAP 2.0 is how we can better align some of the project procedures with existing VR policies. And this is really with an eye towards sustainability. So when the DIF money's gone, those millions of dollars, how can Nebraska VR continue to sustain this service model? The last piece is a focus on identifying those core fidelity components. So this comes in part of our evaluation, working with the CPAP 2.0 team to really articulate what those core components are so that potentially when this project is over, other VR agencies might adopt or replicate the model. Just to sum up those core model components, so I mentioned the target populations, those past VR clients. And when I mean past VR clients, it's people who just in the last few years closed out of VR and calling them, sending them letters in the mail, inviting them to come back. And Amy will talk more about some of the challenges around that. We look at the project services, so very much a dual customer approach. We've heard a lot of that today, how the VR agency is interfacing with the business, with this upskill backfill model. We're thinking about that sustainability and career advancement. I think we know from the regulations that the VR agencies have the authority to help people to obtain and retain employment, but we don't hear as much about this advancement and providing those advancement services, and that is squarely where this project falls. With that is kind of a shift in mindset when we think about the impact on outcomes for this particular effort. It's about increasing wages and increasing hours worked and increasing the number of employer provided benefits like health insurance. And then also kind of shifting that mindset so that wages, personal wages, are your primary source of support. So with that comes kind of a reduced reliance on public benefits. We're not saying you have to get off your public benefits. We're saying, can we bring wages up as your primary source? For the services from the participant point of view, when they come to Nebraska VR for the CPAP program, they have access to the full suite of VR services, career counseling, the comprehensive kind of wraparound services. But again, that mindset shift a bit is focusing on how we're accessing and creating career pathways for advancement. And it's primarily done through credential attainment, education, training, and a little bit of interfacing with the employer. It also acknowledges this idea of there's multiple entry and exit points along those career pathways. So it's not that VR is just a one-time thing, they're going to help you get a job. It's that you can come back to VR many, many times, and that's not seen as a failure on anybody's part, particularly when you're coming back because you want that promotion and you want to move up and you want to get a better job and make more money. From the business side, similar, so they're still receiving those kind of VR business employer supports. There's these dedicated business-facing staff. They use some strategies that are kind of innovative, like these individualized business plans that kind of formalize the partnership, and then it allows Nebraska VR to accept referrals from the business, referrals of incumbent workers, and they're continuing to provide those supports to the business through other technical assistance as well. So things like ergonomic assessments, maybe some disability awareness training, anything that's going to help to promote advancement for those workers who are there. RSA would like me to articulate what the targeted outcomes are. So all the DIF grantees have the same obligation to make progress towards these outcomes with the grants that they're given. Each state has set individual targets. So for Nebraska's project, they're looking at participants to earn $18 per hour, to be working full-time, so 40 hours a week. And their goal is to have almost everybody, or 87%, are exiting with employer-provided health insurance. That's one of the key measures. And then lastly, it's that personal wages as the primary source of support, so reducing reliance on public benefits. The goal there is very high, 100%. From the business side, they want to conduct outreach to 400 businesses across the state and create 100 business partnerships through those individualized business plans. So how do we evaluate this model? There's many of my peers are here, maybe not here right now, but out there today who are doing this kind of work. So we've all kind of fallen into very similar approaches from a methods point of view. We have to do a process evaluation. We have to really document the progress towards the project objectives, those challenges, strategies to address challenges is a common thing. Our project has a fidelity assessment component where we are really looking to identify those core components, articulate them, and consistently kind of measure those. Of course, we have an outcome evaluation where we're looking at data, secondary analysis. Our design also includes in-depth qualitative interviews and surveys of participants. So I think that's a nice way to kind of complement some of the case management system data. And then we help to support some of the progress reporting, so how we collate the data around all those sources. Today, we're going to focus on the outcome evaluation, specifically take a look at some of the participant characteristics of the individuals who've engaged in the program so far. We'll look at some of the performance and program measures, and then I'll share some of that participant input. So enrollment, as I mentioned, the CPAP team, heroic effort to reach out to past VR clients who are scattered in the wind. It's really difficult to find them. They've moved on from VR. Many of them have changed their address, contact information, but they have made quite an effort to reach out to those people. At this point, I think it's almost 2,000 individuals that they've tried to contact and bring them in and kind of get them interested in participating in the model demonstration. So they use this INR, this information and referral strategy, which is a way to kind of take people who are sort of interested and thinking about it and give them some space and give them some counseling to think about whether this is the right program for them, whether the timing is right. And when they do that, hopefully they move on to apply. So year to year, we've seen an increase in the enrollment. At this stage, we're at year 4, midpoint. The cumulative total of individuals who at least got to that INR stage is just over 300. And from that, about 60% go on to apply and really engage their official participants in the model demonstration from an evaluation point of view. And that's at 182. When we take a look at those 182, we want to kind of see where they are in the process. And so I set this up. This will kind of help us understand some of the demographic information we'll present next. But at this stage of the 182, about half of them are open and active. So they're receiving services. They're still in the process. About 23% have exited with an unsuccessful outcome, and 46 have exited with a successful outcome. So about 25% so far of those enrolled. And that's the group we'll kind of be looking at specifically today, but I'll continue to break down the demographics by those three groups. It's an exercise that we kind of got in the habit of doing on a quarterly basis when we pull the case record data. We're looking at it across these three categories, and then there's a few others, but I couldn't fit them all on the slide, right? But the goal of looking at it this way is to just identify if there's any particular demographic groups that are disproportionately represented in any of these categories. And it's sometimes actionable, other times it's just kind of interesting at this stage in the process. So I'll point out a couple of those observations, beginning with age. At this stage, the project has enrolled people at all different age categories. So starting with those young people, really early career, age 14 to 24, all the way through those who are age 55 and above. Broad range, but one of the things that sticks out to us that's kind of interesting, we heard a little bit about it earlier today too, some of these older workers. It seems that the individuals who have exited successfully, those who are age 55 and above seem to be doing the best. So they've been the most successful in the program so far. Again, these numbers are really small. I understand that it's only 46 people, but it's a trend that we're keeping an eye on. Don't know why. Similar outlier in the gender, so more women overall have engaged in the program across all categories disproportionately. Women right now in the active caseload represent 2/3. Again, very interesting. Don't know why. Something that we have some theories, but we'll have to kind of see how the program runs its course to see if this holds. But it's been consistent over 4 years. Women have been more successful, so they represent 52% of the successful outcomes. And then the other outlier there, if you notice in that middle column, those that exited with an unsuccessful outcome are disproportionately male. Again, something to keep an eye on. For the next few slides, race and ethnicity, I think the demographics of people enrolled in the program very much reflect the state of Nebraska. It is a state without a lot of racial or ethnic diversity. So across the board, about 80% of the participants have been white. Black and African American are somewhere around 6 to 7% of the cases served. And from there, very small percentages of American Indian or Alaska Natives, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian, and those who did not self-identify. Sort of similar for ethnicity, so about 80 to 90% are non-Hispanic, and a small percentage of the individuals who've participated are Hispanic. Primary disability spans many different categories. At this stage, mental health conditions are kind of bubbling up to the top as the most frequently reported primary disability, but hearing disability, orthopedic, learning disability, all represented in this group. A few less predominant primary disabilities are developmental, substance use, visual disabilities, and traumatic brain injury. Not seeing a lot of those individuals so far. Employment status is an important one just to differentiate the individuals in this group. So we look at employment status at the time of IPE, the Individualized Plan for Employment. So this is very early in the VR process. And what I want to point out here is that about 90% of the people who come into the CPAP program are already employed. And that is exactly what we would expect because that's who we're targeting with this intervention. But just to hit that home, I think it's a good descriptive statistic. Of those individuals that are employed, a lot of them already have health insurance as well. So if this is a target of the project, it's really more about moving the needle closer to that 87% target. So right now it's around 50 to 60% of people already have health insurance provided by their employer, but we're just going to see if we can move that up. A project measure that we look at is days in the program. So CPAP 2.0 participants that have finished, so that 46 that we were looking at, they've been enrolled in the program for an average of 16 months. And there's a wide range. So there's some people that have come in 6 months, banged out a quick certificate, moved on. Others are enrolled in some longer term, maybe a 2-year college program, or maybe that's just taking them longer because they're working full time and going to school at night. So they've been engaged for a little bit of a longer time. I also wanted to make a note here. It's kind of a separate sidebar, but I'll just mention it. As I was describing earlier, that kind of information and referral stage, one thing we're observing is that the individuals that do not go on to apply, they're sitting in that stage for about 3 months. So they're really thinking about it. And the reason why I point this out is because as a DIF grant, you're measured on these metrics of how many people you've served, but there's this whole group of people who had some touch with Nebraska VR. They got some counseling. They had interactions with their VR counselor, their career pathways recruiter, and they're thinking about it and they don't go on to apply, but that doesn't mean they won't come back later. I think some of the career pathways recruiters have said, yeah, people come back 6 months later when the time is right for them. So I think it's an interesting group that we're also trying to kind of keep an eye on. The other piece is that given the DIF grant, it's 5 years, you can't necessarily observe all the outcomes that you might want to. So we're trying to also weave in some of those intermediate outcomes. So thinking about credential attainment and measurable skill gains. And most people in the program are obtaining those two things. And so those are those kind of intermediate indicators of success. Some of the actual outcomes. So if you call back to the targets, for the first 46 individuals that have closed, they're earning about $25 an hour on average. So this is exceeding the target that was set at 18. And for context, I think minimum wage in Nebraska, $12 an hour. I think it just went up to $13.50 in January. Does that sound right? Yes, thank you. So fairly, substantially above the minimum wage, which is a good thing. And everyone's working full time, almost everybody. So about 75% of the participants are working full time, 35 hours a week on average, 40 hours at median. So there's a lot of people that are working in that full-time status. And about 3/4 are receiving health insurance from their employers so far. That last measure, 87%. So almost everyone, as I mentioned, their target was 100%, but maybe that was a bold target. 87% are reporting personal wages as the primary source of support. So they're reducing reliance on public benefits. We've observed some individuals who come to the program on SSI, SSDI, TANF, and when they close, they're no longer receiving those benefits. On the business side, they've far exceeded their goal to reach out to businesses. So they've reached 683. The goal is 400. And they've also exceeded the number of business partnerships that they've established through those individualized business plans. They're at 135. So to sum up those outcomes to date, it's looking like, and again, very early, wide range of outcomes so far, but some of the trends are very promising. The participants who upskill are earning more money. Right now, it's about $5 more per hour or $200 per week. More of them are having access to that employer-provided health insurance, having those personal wages as their primary source, and the businesses are benefiting as well. I want to take a few more minutes, and I'm going to pass it to Amy just to provide some of the participant input. So as part of our evaluation, we've done qualitative interviews, in-depth qualitative interviews with 17 CPAP 2.0 participants. And then we had an opportunity to follow up. So we're really trying to follow people along as they move through the program. And we've conducted 9 follow-up interviews so far, but some early findings. Some of the themes are emerging. It's a theme because we ask people explicitly, how do you define career advancement? We know how RSA defined it with the specific program measures and performance measures, but we wanted to hear from the participants on what it means to them. We hear a lot about the financial support that Nebraska VR through the grant provides to individuals, the emotional support to engage and kind of take on this big step in their career, and the confidence building that the grant provides. When people have spoken to us about the meaning of career advancement, they talk about those new opportunities. They talk about their own growth and self-improvement and just the options that the project is providing to them to kind of make different choices. Some of them are shifting their goals with this opportunity. They're thinking about jobs in different fields. Maybe they're ready to take that leap to a new type of job or advance within their current job or career, maybe go after that supervisory role or that management position. But realistically, they also talk to us about the barriers. And, you know, all of these people are adults. They all have full-time jobs for the most part. And so there's a lot of things that balance there. They talk about their family obligations. They talk about how am I going to go to school at night after I worked all day and I have 3 kids who need to go to practice. And it's a real struggle. Transportation is always a barrier. Some of that academic piece, you know, for some people, we hear them talk about school. Maybe they left college. Maybe they needed accommodations they weren't getting. And so the idea of going back and subjecting yourself to that again is not necessarily an easy choice. One person said here, the cool thing is the options part. So you're not just like, well, you're here, deal with it. I think that is a really nice way to kind of sum it up. I'll share a couple other quotes quickly. The meaning of career advancement. So we know it's about making more money, but there's other things here. So one person described, they said, maybe hopefully they'll move up in the pay scale and also get better hours. They've always been required to take call and something where not a whole lot of call or weekend involvement. So you can just kind of imagine, you know, yes, it's about making more money, but what if you also had your weekends free and you didn't have to be on call? That would be great. It's also about feeling accomplished from doing something worthwhile. People are moving into positions that better suit their skills and their capabilities and their interests. They're exploring new things. And they're also planning for the future. So this stability piece is another thing we hear. So when they're thinking about taking the leap into the model demonstration, some of them have that in mind, like what does my future look like? And this person said, I hate to sound mercenary, but making more money. I'm tired of being poor. I've lived below the poverty line all my adult life. And skip ahead a bit, they want to be able to go out and eat once in a while at places that they like, and they want to be able to have enough money to retire. So that's something we're hearing too more and more, especially with that older worker group that I mentioned. Retirement is, they want it to be around the corner, but they might not have the financial means to do that. So how can career pathways help make those last 5 years of work or something help people to get there? I mentioned this before, but the financial support afforded by the DIF grants, thank you, RSA. It's helped these individuals to access things that they didn't have access to before. This person is talking about becoming a mechanic, and he was a CPAP 1.0 participant who continued with CPAP 2.0. He said, I'm just grateful for all the help overall. It's very confusing to try to navigate any of this stuff by yourself. So all of it feels like a gift, almost a gift. We hear that all the time, a gift, because it kind of lands on your doorstep. A career pathways recruiter calls you and says, hey, we have a grant. Do you want to come back? It feels like a gift. They said, I didn't realize how much it took to be a mechanic, the license you have to pay for, the classes you have to take. It's not something they would have been able to afford, and it's not something most people can afford, and it keeps you out of those professions. So if Nebraska VR through this program can kind of open those doors for people, it's a real opportunity. The emotional support, this person described how CPAP 2.0 pushed them. Like it made them think, I didn't finish this, thinking about how they left college. And the reason why is that it felt like there was something telling me I had some unfinished business, and it was almost like a godsend, like, hey, you need to do this. So a gift, a godsend, very woo-woo. I liked how she described this as woo-woo, but it's real. and that confidence building. So thinking about really having the confidence, maybe you call it self-advocacy, to take advantage of the things that they're offering. So this person was talking about going back to school, and that this time around, they're going to actually use all the help that Nebraska BR will give for tutoring and stuff like that. And if you're having problems with your classes, and last time I just kind of suffered through it. So there's kind of a shift there in the way that this person's thinking about how they're going to get through. I'm going to pass it to Amy. And Amy, I don't know if you want to go start with your story.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
So I would just start by adding that we had a lot of growing pains along the way, but we've had a lot of success. So this is Kevin. He was actually my client. I'd been a counselor for 3 years. I was brand new to VR when I started with CPAP 2.0. And Kevin came to me. He was one of the clients that I called back. And I would add that what we're doing is calling back from the years 2017 to 2020. And anybody that was successful during that time is kind of how they qualify for the CPAP program. And so I called Kevin back, and a little hesitation. And then I got a call back, and he said, my mom thinks, my mom got the letter and, thinks I should reach out. Kevin had a lot of barriers along the way. Kevin came to me. He had been out of college for 10 years. He had been going to Northeast Community College in Norfolk, Nebraska. If you don't know where that is, it's Johnny Carson's hometown. And so he came to me, and he was very passionate. He had changed a lot in those 10 years. He left Northeast with a 0.85 grade point average and wanted to know what he needed to do to get back. Luckily, I have a passion for education, and so I really wanted to see him do this. His impairment is he has MS. And so we talked a lot about there's times in his life where he had paralysis. And so that was our focus of what could he do if he, went back to school, what could he do that if he needed to work remotely, that would be something. And so he went into business. There was a lot of barriers along the way, having a 0.85 grade point average. We went in together the first day. We filed an appeal, and then he was able to start, but it would be every semester would be, okay, well, now you have another hold on your account because you're not taking as many credit hours that you need to take, but on the flip side, you can't take so many credit hours because you have to get your G.8 up. And so there were so many things going against it. But long story, he passed or graduated last May, invited me to his graduation with his family. It was very emotional. He comes from a Hispanic background, to where his entire family's, celebrated and wanted to make sure we were there. And had to go over and do pictures. And I told his mom, she just kept thanking me. And I said, I didn't do it. I said, Kevin did it. But being mom knew how much it kind of took to push him because he had those 10 years and he hadn't done it. And so she was like, no, you really have made a difference. Kevin then went on. We have what's called, I don't know if this is in other areas, but we have the Promise program, and he was accepted to the University of Nebraska, and he is a senior now, and finishing up a degree in accounting, which him and I always laugh because he struggled with math, but I'm always like, but accounting makes sense if you're dealing with money. So here's my success story. I have to, there's some things we did a lot of ATP accommodations, because there'd be we didn't support the purchase of computers at first through the RSA grant. We were able to later get that approved, but with him, I just did an ATP referral. And so we were able to get him a laptop. There was things where he couldn't go sit out at the lab like a normal, because his body would give out being out at the college all day. And so I think he called me last semester too, when he got down to UNL, and said, what do you think about studying abroad? This is just a kid that it just continues to amaze me. But long story, he'll be a senior this year going back. And so I had a student at the same time that Kevin started, that was in vet school. They actually got done about the same time, and my Mary, who recently passed away, would tell me, man, this isn't fair. You got your unicorn right away. You have a vet that's going to graduate. And I always say, actually, Kevin is my unicorn because I worry so much about him and his health declining that he'll still be able to do his job. So there's just a lot of accommodations that, and the confidence that was built in this young man during that time. So, and I want to say he's 30. So long road ahead. Like I mentioned, some of the growing pains. Some of the challenges, and I know this happens everywhere, was just kind of getting staff hired and trained. And then it seems that we do have vacancies in the counselor role. And so that, every time one of the most important things that we've seen, and especially saw in this, is that counselor-client relationship. And the clients that we are calling back, that were successful, that are saying yes, develop that relationship with that first VR 110 counselor. And that's normally the ones that trust us to come back. And um, and the other thing is when a client goes to regular VR, they're going in the door. If they have a crisis, they know they need help, where we're calling back just randomly out of the blue saying, hey, what do you think about doing this? Or have you thought about? And if that's when we talk about like those days in between the 3 months, they're processing like, gosh, I have this great opportunity, but yeah, I have kids at home or in a full-time job. And so that's where I'm seeing that's probably what's going on during that time. Some of the people we've called back during those years, we were on under order of selection. So from 2000 to 2020, we were getting a lot of the cases that regular VR couldn't take. And so some of the things that we're seeing, we may have had a case that we've seen that had open 5 different times, so they're a repeat when we're looking at that list of 2,700 people. Sometimes they were coming because you did see a high note of hearing impaired, and so they were coming for hearing aids because regular VR couldn't pay during that time. And then the fact of those years, we're really struggling to be able to reach people because this is a population that I know, like a lot of our clients have the prepaid phones. They don't have that phone anymore, from that long ago. And so they're coming out of substance abuse. When we get the contact information, it was a substance abuse center. So we're not going to be able to locate them there. Somewhere from prison, we're not going to be able to, that's their last contact. I have a funny one. We have a note about people thinking maybe it was a scam. It was too good to be true when the letter came to your house. And I actually had a student who just totally fit the bill perfect. He was an auto body student and had been sustaining a job for quite a while. And when he got the letter, he wanted to go into working on, I'm in rural Nebraska, so he wanted to work on large machinery, farm machinery. And so I was like, oh, he's perfect. Well, he went out to sign up at the college and was telling him everything we were going to do. And he needed a lot. He has trouble reading, so he needed a laptop. And then with this grant, we were able at the community college level cover pretty much all the tuition. And when he went to DD services, they said, oh no, this is a scam. Don't call them back. And so then I was like, luckily he just kept pursuing it. And the DD service coordinator from the college called me and she was just in disbelief that we had that. I go, you're killing my outreach efforts. Like here I am trying to call. So that worked out great. And then eventually became a partner, that supported us. So we are seeing that there's more clients once they find out that we can do short-term, long-term training. They're choosing the long-term training. I mean, they're always like, I was on the fence about if I should go back to college. And there's several of those stories in here where they're like, we just felt like that was the boost I needed. And so, so I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I'm very, excited to see all these students that we have as well. And so, And to me, that's sustainability. You know, if they get that degree, they'll be able to do quite a bit. So, let's see, where else? Oh, and then we have like where businesses were reluctant to sign, so we had to develop that business relationship, and getting referrals from businesses. And one of the other things we're noting is that, we have a lot in Nebraska, there's a lot of rural community, and so we're seeing our larger cities, Omaha and Lincoln, where, people are probably saying yes more, or we had more open cases there. With strategies to address our challenges, we went back and refined our outreach efforts to try to address the scam. Try to reach out to more, get, just the word out more in marketing. And then we also looked at changing our marketing materials to include specific trainings, and customize it for businesses. When we're going out, I'll say one of our popular areas that, as far as businesses, healthcare signed on right away. And that's, we see a lot in healthcare. And so if we could add that to our marketing flyer, we learned and gave them specific ideas that helped them understand it more, what we were able to do. And then recently, and one of the things I guess with the customized for businesses was just when they're going out to doing business outreach, understanding, everybody has a different definition of disability. And so for them to understand, just all the different, like, at least give it a try, at least talk to us. And we do ask for, you have to provide medical documentation, and sometimes that's hard. People don't want to do that, it's personal, and we get that. And then, so most recently, then we've added the entry-level truck driving training. They did this in the first grant, and so we have about a year as far as being active with clients, and so we're addressing that right now. Our plans for sustainability, add advancement to our VR policies and messaging, train staff on career pathways versus just employment. The BAMs versus the business pathway specialists, looking at the similarities, differences, and changes. When you said CPAP, not only do we have CPAP, our counselors are called CPRs. That doesn't help when we call back, because everybody's like, okay, they're trying to sell me a CPAP machine, and yeah, the CPR part. One time they asked if there was anything you could change. I'm like, I would maybe suggest that. And so let's see, just looking at the similarities and differences, and then the CPRs versus like a VR specialist. Majority of clients want to upskill. CPRs often speak with employers and specialists don't. We do talk to them and see, there's always that tricky conversation of advancement, and the client doesn't want to ask, his boss, well, if I do this, but we try to put it back at him. If you're going to spend all that time doing this and the training and the time, it takes away from your family, you should be rewarded and having this additional skill. We have a training and development specialist, and she works on a short-term training database, and that will be available to all of VR, or Nebraska VR, so we'll be able to use that. We're identifying the best way to reach out to individuals previously served regarding advancement. Like you said, some people laugh when we talk about we send a letter, we send an email, we text. We've been looking at updating our marketing strategies, and then identifying how a caseload sizes might be a little bit different. And we have a coworker on our team who has been with VR for a long time. So she's been able to look at VR versus CPAP, and she just gets it, because she's great for us, because she says it's not a one-stop shop. When they come to VR, they come, in crisis, and then the goal should be they go out and get a job, and then we want them to come back. We want to then, once they're stable, look at what else they're the opportunities that they have available to us. So she's a really good advocate about going out and pushing that. So I'm thinking close. I was trying to think. And it's funny how fast things go. I mean, when we talk about having a 5-year grant, I know I came in, we had 4 years left, and now when you're looking at, we have 1 year, what can we really do to, and I know, I mean, we're always looking at numbers and stuff like that to meet our goals, but the differences that we've been able to make, and really, when I talk about the certificates and the courses that we've been able to offer for these people, just something they'll be able to carry for the rest of their life. And personally, for the 3 years that I've been a counselor, people have been so thankful and grateful, and so it's I'm on the good side. I'm on the fun part of it. So, thank you. Yeah, do you guys have any questions or?
Hi, you guys. So I'm the project director for the Oregon DIF, and we have the same findings for youth and our dropout rate. So I know you said you don't know why, but could you hypothesize a little bit? Because we're trying to figure that out too. The 18 to 24-year-olds.
That one is hard because that's not the area we really, and actually we're kind of struggling with that now. And I still say CDL for truck driving, but we're kind of in a stage where we're in discussion with that because I don't know that we've had clients really under 24. I mean, we have that range that we can, but I was talking the other day with I do have 2 counselors here with me from Nebraska, and we were talking about that today. That they, I don't know that we've really served many under age 24. So when we're looking at all the liability that comes with being a CDL driver, and is that something, are we setting them up? Are they, will they be able to get a job after that, and insurance and all these different things? So, but yeah, I don't know why on that end, as far as like with you as youth. I do have my own theory on the older, maybe because I'm in that age. So I'm just like, I think they're, they've struggled. And we have some people where, like, as far as going out and doing business outreach, they can sign up the business. I'm going to use healthcare because I have a lot of people in healthcare. They can sign up the business, and still make a pretty good salary, and we're able to help them. We have guidelines that they have to meet and stuff. And I just think they get to that age and they're like, well, here it is right in front of me. Now or never. It's kind of, I think when you start getting to that age, you start thinking a little bit more. Some of those younger kids, though, I do get, they'll call back. And I had one the other day. I know I talked to him in the beginning, and when he called, I said, Brady, we're down to 1 year now. Like we talked when we had 4 years, so we can still do it, but you really got to make a commitment at this point now. So. Thank you.
The question was, will there be a 3.0? Amy?
You know what's funny? Well, and so we had a recent situation. Our supervisor who started this, she had always, I have a background in grants. And so when we started and I understood this, and I was like, can I read it? Where most people are like, yeah, I don't care I just want to do my job. And she would always say, you're going to be CPAP 3.0. And then I would laugh and I'd be like, oh, no. And then unfortunately we have this situation come up, and I'm CPAP 2.0, but there's a lot of questions regarding that, and our team is really concerned about what that looks like. And when we talk about sustainability, but yeah, I don't know about
I would love to see a 3.0 in another state. I would love to see the model replicated. I think I mean, they've had 10 years of piloting and refining, and I know it hasn't been like a continuous 10 years. There's been so many changes. There's been changes to the target population. But I think for me, the 3.0 is going to be in Nebraska, it's going to be about sustaining the things that worked. And in other states, I think giving it a try. I don't know that the thing that's not working right now is the recruitment and enrollment. That piece, so like I said before, they've reached out to almost 2,000 past VR clients, and this is consistent with 1.0. It's less than 10% that say yes to come back. And so that part is not really working. It doesn't seem like the best way to do it. So what I think what you guys are talking about is how you change the messaging when a person leaves VR to say, come back. Like we know that you're allowed to, but we really mean it. And maybe it's about creating a mechanism when a person is exiting that you say, what's the next step in your career path? I want to see you then. I want to see you in 6 months when you're done with your probationary period and it's time to get your next certificate. Like, and making that part of the business as usual or kind of the expectation.
Yeah, there was another group today that kind of spoke on that said something about, just checking in with them at 6 months and seeing, and the hard part that we have is, once you close a case, you really shouldn't be reaching back out, or you get boundary issues or things like that. So sometimes that's hard, but if you had one that you knew, it's like, I started, I got to keep moving, I got to make some money, and get going, and then maybe just put them, and just get permission. I'm not trying to cross boundaries, but they did express interest, and sometimes it does take a boost from us to remind them. And one other thing I forgot to mention that we are doing is, we are working with supported employment. And so with SSI and SSDI recipients, and so that's a little bit more difficult population because you have, a team involved, you have the family involved, and you definitely don't want them to lose benefits, but we want them to know you can work and you can increase a few hours. And we have people that do a benefits analysis to make sure that they never cross that line, because we don't want that either. But just the fulfillment that people get from working and going out and, if they can go from 5 to 10 hours and I was thinking of one more thing was when we want to increase salary and benefits. I know the one thing that when we get to that point and people have advanced there, they struggle on the retirement. So when that retirement piece came up, it's like, that's the one part that's hard. They probably never put into retirement. They don't even know, so they need a little bit more education on that part too. And
I know one of the things, before I left VR, I was there for over 16 years. We had that tracking mechanism as soon as the individuals, especially for ones that had the ticket assignments.
Yep.
So we had the tracking. So they would go to our post VR counselors and they would track them 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, for all of that time. And then if they noticed at any time that our individual said, yes, I need additional help, they would be reassigned back to a counselor, a consultant, or someone who is still there, so that they could get replaced or reignited in their field if they just needed simple services. It wasn't for a magnitude of services, but just something to start with. So that was great for some of our individuals, but we did not do that across the spectrum of all individuals. It only happened for our ticket assignments.
Yep, I agree. I had gone to the benefits training about a year ago, and gosh, I believe she was from Easter Seals, our trainer, and she just kept just re-emphasizing how important that is that ticket gets assigned, because that keeps somebody on it and on the case to follow up. So, yeah. Good point. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for staying for the last.
Yeah. Great job.